At 18:12 hours. The Black Sea. The light was fading fast, turning the water into a sheet of dark steel when the radar operator aboard the Russian frigate Admiral Essen noticed something unusual pushing west at 32,000 feet. Single contact. Fast, clean signature, not American. French. Within seconds, the identification resolved. Rafale M carrier capable. Naval configuration. Flying alone, but not really alone. 200 miles south, the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle was operating in international waters, officially participating in a multinational maritime security exercise. Unofficially, Paris had just decided to test how far Moscow was willing to push. The Rafale wasn't transiting randomly. Its vector cut diagonally toward Crimea's western air defense envelope, close enough to make Russian commanders uncomfortable, far enough to remain legal. In Sevastopol, inside the Black Sea Fleet command bunker, a senior duty officer leaned over the tactical display. French naval aviation. Why now? No one answered, because everyone in the room understood what this meant. France deploying a Rafale M near the Black Sea wasn't about reconnaissance. It wasn't about surveillance. It was about presence. And presence in this region was provocation by geometry. 18-19 hours. Inside the Rafale cockpit, the French pilot, call sign Vautour, kept his radar in passive mode. No emissions, no aggressive posture, just silent collection. Below him, Russian S-400 batteries along Crimea's coastline were already tracking. Long-range acquisition radars painted his thermal bloom in precise detail. Digital systems calculated engagement envelopes, time to intercept solutions, probability of kill matrices. The French jet wasn't locked. But it was measured, and that distinction mattered. Paris had chosen its moment carefully. Diplomatic tensions were rising over maritime shipping corridors. NATO exercises were increasing. Russian patrol patterns had grown more assertive. The Rafale M was not there to fight. It was there to be seen. 18-26 hours. Two Russian Su-30SM fighters roared off the runway at Belbek Air Base, afterburners igniting in the twilight. Intercept protocol. Professional. Predictable, but speed matters in signaling. The Sukhoi climbed aggressively to 35,000 feet, vectoring toward the lone French jet. Their onboard radars swept wide arcs across the sky, searching for more. Because a Rafale M rarely operates alone, and Russia knew it. What Moscow did not yet know was that 180 miles southwest, a French E-2C Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft was orbiting in disciplined silence, feeding data through secure networks to the Charles de Gaulle and Allied NATO ships operating beyond visual range. The Rafale was the visible piece. The network was the real presence. 18-34 hours. The Russian Su-30s closed within 20 miles. Inside their cockpits, the pilots received clear instructions: identify, escort, assert dominance. No weapons release, no missile lock. But proximity would send the message. As the Sukhois approached, Vautour adjusted slightly, subtle climb, minor course correction, maintaining composure. The French pilot did not flare, did not dive, did not accelerate. Calm, professional, intentional. At 10 miles, the first Russian radar warning tone whispered across the Rafale's electronic warfare suite. Not a hard lock, just illumination. The French jet responded not with aggression, but with silence. Because silence is unsettling. 18-39 hours. The Su-30s slid into visual range, positioning off the Rafale's left and right flanks at approximately 800 feet. Close enough to read tail markings, close enough to feel jet wash. The Russian lead pilot rocked his wings slightly, a signal both symbolic and territorial. You are near our line. The French pilot didn't react. Instead, the Rafale Spectra electronic warfare system quietly mapped every radar emission, every communication burst, every microsecond of Russian signal behavior. Collection, not confrontation. From Moscow's perspective, This was manageable. But then the second layer emerged. 1847 hours. NATO maritime radar networks began to populate with new data points. A British Type 45 destroyer operating west of the Bosporus shifted course 12 degrees north. A Turkish frigate adjusted patrol spacing. A Romanian coastal radar installation increased scan frequency. None of these moves were dramatic, but together they reshaped the geometry of the Black Sea. The Rafale was no longer a lone French jet. It was the center of an expanding Allied grid. Russian fleet commanders noticed, and that's when the mood changed. 1852 hours. Inside the Russian National Defense Control Center in Moscow, the situation report updated. French naval aviation operating near Crimea. NATO maritime assets repositioning. No hostile acts, but no retreat either. The calculus became uncomfortable. If Russia escalated, by locking radar, launching additional fighters, activating missile guidance, they would appear reactive. If they did nothing, France would demonstrate that Western naval aviation could operate near Crimea without consequence. Neither option felt satisfying. 19:03 hours. The Russian lead Su-30 pilot made a decision. He switched his radar from track mode to fire control illumination for 3 full seconds. Not long enough to justify engagement. Long enough to trigger alarms. Inside the Rafale cockpit, the warning tone sharpened. Clear. Unmistakable. Fire control quality tracking. Vautour inhaled slowly. He did not turn away. Instead, he transmitted a calm message on International Guard frequency. Russian aircraft. You are operating in a fire control mode. We are conducting lawful transit in international airspace. De-escalate immediately. No accusation, no threat. Just clarity, and clarity forces decisions. 19:05 hours. In Sevastopol, Russian commanders realized the illumination had been recorded. Logged. Shared. If this became public, Moscow would appear as the aggressor. The Su-30's radar dropped back to search mode, but the damage psychological was done, because Paris had not flinched. And neither had NATO. 1914 hours. The Rafale M began a gradual turn south, not retreating, but transitioning to a new orbit point that kept it within range, yet outside immediate S-400 engagement arcs. A chess move. Not a withdrawal. The Russian fighters mirrored the turn, staying close, unwilling to concede airspace dominance. And that's when Russia made a move no one expected. 1921 hours. From the western coast of Crimea, a Bastion P coastal defense system activated its targeting radar briefly, just enough to suggest anti-ship missile readiness. The signal was unmistakable. It wasn't aimed at the Rafale. It was aimed toward the general bearing of the Charles de Gaulle. This changed everything, because now the tension wasn't air-to-air. It was fleet to fleet. Within seconds, French Naval Command elevated readiness status. The Charles de Gaulle's escorts adjusted formation. A French FREM frigate powered its radar to full operational mode. NATO networks tightened. The Black Sea, in under 3 minutes, shifted from controlled intercept to strategic brinkmanship. 1924 hours. Moscow had intended the radar activation as a warning, but Paris interpreted it as expansion, and escalation spirals quickly in confined waters. The Rafale pilot received a short-coded message from French command. Maintain position. Do not provoke. Record everything. Which he did. 1931 hours. The Russian Su-30s, fuel states decreasing, began to consider return vectors. But pride intervened. Instead of peeling away quietly, one Sukhoi executed a high-speed pass across the Rafale's nose at less than 300 feet separation. Aggressive. Unnecessary. Risky. The French jet held steady, but onboard systems captured the maneuver in high-definition telemetry. The data would matter later. 1937 hours. In Washington, NATO command analysts reviewed the live feed. They saw something subtle. Russian air defense systems were not fully activated. Missile batteries remained in standby. The Bastion radar had not re-engaged, meaning Moscow had signaled, but stopped short of commitment. And that hesitation was revealing. 1942 hours. The Rafale M finally altered course decisively southward, returning toward the broader NATO maritime grid. The Russian Su-30s broke formation shortly after, turning back toward Crimea. No missiles fired, no weapons launched, no aircraft damaged. Yet the region felt altered. Because something had shifted. The French had proven they could operate naval aviation assets near the Black Sea without retreat. Russia had demonstrated it would respond, but carefully. Neither side escalated beyond recovery. But both sides had tested the threshold. 20:05 hours. As darkness settled fully over the Black Sea, diplomatic channels began to light up. Paris released a controlled statement, routine maritime aviation activity conducted in international airspace. Professional interactions with regional aircraft. Moscow responded hours later. Foreign military aircraft approached sensitive zones. Russian forces ensured regional security. Both narratives were technically true. But neither captured the real outcome. The real outcome was psychological. France deployed a Rafale M near the Black Sea. Russia reacted quickly, assertively, even aggressively. But when the moment came to escalate beyond signaling, they stopped. And that pause was the shock, because Moscow had expected Paris to keep distance. Instead, France held position, collected data, and left on its own terms. No retreat. No panic. Just geometry, patience, and networked presence. The Black Sea did not erupt into conflict that night. But every commander on both sides understood something had changed. The threshold had been tested. And the next time, the margin for hesitation might be thinner. So here's the question. When presence alone becomes provocation, how long can major powers keep playing this silent game of proximity before one maneuver is misread, one radar pulse lasts too long, and one pilot reacts a second too fast? Because in the Black Sea, tension doesn't explode loudly. It accumulates quietly. And sometimes, that's more dangerous.